The silence in the gym was deafening, not the comfortable quiet of concentration, but the heavy, suffocating hush that comes when something has gone terribly wrong. Every player stood frozen, their eyes locked on the exit door as it swung shut with finality that echoed to the entire arena. Caitlin Clark had just walked out Team USA practice, and in that moment, women's basketball changed forever. The whispers started before the door had even fully closed. Did she really just leave? I can't believe this is happening. Someone should go after her. But no one moved. No one spoke. They just stood there, witnesses to what insiders are now calling the most shocking moment in Team USA history. What makes this moment so unbelievable isn't just that it happened. It's that it happened to her. Caitlin Clark, the golden girl of women's basketball, the rookie who shattered records, brought millions of new fans to the sport, and single-handedly transformed the WNBA from a niche league into must-watch television. This is a player who made charter jets possible for a league that had never known such luxury. This is the athlete whose jersey sales outpace everyone else's combined. This is a phenomenon who increased ratings by 36% whenever she stepped on the court. And yet, according to multiple sources who were there that day, she had just been benched for the fourth consecutive practice. Not rotated. Not rested. Benched. Ignored. Left out while players with half her talent and none of her impact took the court in her place. The footage is grainy, shot for what appears to be a spectator's phone, but what it captures is crystal clear. Caitlin standing courtside, hands on her hips, waiting for her name to be called. The coach looking everywhere but at her, other players awkwardly avoiding eye contact. And then, that moment when the drill begins, and she's once again left standing alone while others take her spot. What happened next is what has the entire sports world buzzing today. According to eyewitnesses, Caitlin didn't yell. She didn't argue. She didn't create a scene. She simply picked up her water bottle, walked toward the exit, and never looked back. The internet exploded within minutes. Hashtag #CaitlinWalk began trending worldwide. Fans posted side-by-side comparisons of her record-breaking performances next to footage of her sitting on the bench during Team USA practices. Former players weighed in, analysts debated, and somewhere in a New York studio, Stephen A. Smith was preparing a segment that would send shockwaves through the entire sports media landscape. But what no one could have predicted was what happened next. Because according to sources close to the situation, this wasn't just a temporary walkout. This wasn't just a moment of frustration. This was a final straw in a pattern of disrespect so blatant, so consistent, so baffling that it left everyone asking the same question. What could possibly make the WNBA's Golden Girl walk away from Team USA for good? Caitlin Clark isn't just another player. She's a phenomenon, a force of nature that transformed women's basketball overnight. Before she arrived, WNBA ratings were stagnant, arenas were half empty, and players were flying commercial like ordinary citizens. Then came Clark, and suddenly everything changed. The moment she stepped onto the court, viewership skyrocketed. Ticket sales surged through the roof. Merchandise flew off shelves. She became the golden goose, the cash cow that revived a league struggling for relevance. The numbers don't lie. A staggering 36% drop in ratings during All-Star Weekend when she wasn't playing. Last season, she didn't miss a single game. This year, 17 games missed. Coincidence? Hardly. Every time Clark sits, the league suffers. Every time she plays, magic happens. She brought charter jets to a league that previously flew economy. She brought millions of new fans who had never watched women's basketball before. She brought the kind of excitement that makes headlines and moves markets. And yet, despite being the engine driving this renaissance, she finds herself repeatedly benched, overlooked, and disrespected. The pattern is too consistent to ignore. The timing too perfect to be coincidence. But what makes this story truly explosive is what happened next. The moment that changed everything and sent shockwaves through the entire sports world. What happens next changes not just Clark's career, but the future of women's basketball forever. But what the cameras didn't show was the cold calculation happening behind the scenes. For months, whispers had circulated through the league about a growing resentment toward Caitlin Clark. A resentment that had nothing to do with her talent and everything to do with what she represented. The coaching staff, led by veterans who have been in the league for decades, saw Clark not as a rising star, but as a threat to their established order. They had built their careers on a certain vision of women's basketball, one that valued experience over flash, teamwork over individual brilliance. And then came Clark, with her record-breaking stats, her social media dominance, her ability to fill arenas like no one before. She wasn't just a player, she was a phenomenon, and that made her dangerous. The coaches began to subtly undermine her, first with comments about her immaturity, then with questions about her team-first mentality. Each time Clark was benched, they'd spin it as a teachable moment, but fans saw through the excuses. The pattern was too consistent, too deliberate to be a coincidence. Other players noticed it too, but few dared to speak out. After all, the coaches held the power to make or break careers. What the public didn't know was that behind closed doors, these coaches had been strategizing for months, looking for ways to remind Clark that she wasn't bigger than the game. They saw her as arrogant, entitled, a product of a new generation that didn't respect the foundations they had built. And so they made a decision. They would break her down, piece by piece, until she understood her place. What they didn't anticipate was that Caitlin Clark wasn't just any player. She was a force of nature, and forces of nature don't break. They transform. And what happened next would leave the entire basketball world questioning everything they thought they knew about power, respect, and the true cost of jealousy. Caitlin Clark didn't just appear out of nowhere to dominate women's basketball. She emerged from the heartland of America, a small-town girl with impossible dreams and a work ethic that would eventually terrify her competitors. Growing up in West Des Moines, Iowa, she wasn't born with silver sneakers in her crib. She was just another kid who fell in love with basketball, shooting hoops in her driveway until her fingers bled and her muscles screamed. But what set her apart wasn't talent. It was obsession. While other kids were at parties or hanging out at the mall, Caitlin was in the gym practicing her signature step-back three-pointer until it became as natural as breathing. Her father would often find her there late at night, the echo of the bouncing ball, the only sound in an otherwise silent house. "Go to bed, Caitlin," he'd say, but she'd just nod and keep shooting, knowing that somewhere, someone else was working harder, and she couldn't let that happen. High school basketball in Iowa isn't exactly the pipeline to WNBA stardom. It's not California, not Texas, not New York. But Caitlin turned Dowling Catholic High School into her personal showcase, shattering records and drawing college scouts from across the country. Still, many questioned if her flashy style would translate to the next level. They wondered if her confidence bordered on arrogance, if her behind-the-back passes were more show than substance. The doubts only fueled her fire. When she arrived at the University of Iowa, the expectations were moderate. The Hawkeyes were a solid program, but not exactly a powerhouse. That changed almost immediately. Caitlin didn't just play basketball. She reinvented it, bringing an NBA-style flair to the women's game that had never been seen before. Logo threes from 30 feet, no problem. No-look passes through traffic, just another Tuesday. She was magic on hardwood, a generational talent who made the impossible look routine. But with greatness comes resistance. Opposing fans booed her. Opposing players targeted her with aggressive fouls that often went unpunished. The sports media questioned her attitude, her leadership, her everything. They wanted to fit her into their neat little boxes, to categorize her as this or that, but she refused to be contained. What they didn't understand was that Caitlin Clark wasn't just playing for herself. She was playing for every small-town kid who was told they weren't good enough. She was playing for every girl who was told basketball was a boys' game. She was playing for every underdog who had ever been counted out. And that's what made her unstoppable. Her sophomore year, she led Iowa to the NCAA tournament, where they faced Louisville in the Sweet 16. Down by 2 points with seconds remaining, Caitlin took the ball at half court, dribbled between her legs, stepped back from the logo, and sank the game-winning three as time expired. The arena erupted. The sports world took notice. That shot wasn't just a basket. It was a statement, a declaration that a new era of women's basketball had arrived, and Caitlin Clark was its standard bearer. Her junior year brought even more accolades and more controversy. She became the all-time leading scorer in Big Ten history, male or female. She was named the National Player of the Year. She appeared on magazine covers and television shows. But with each new achievement came increased scrutiny. Some analysts praised her for revolutionizing the women's game. Others criticized her for being too flashy or not team-oriented enough. The double standard was glaring. Male players with similar styles were celebrated as geniuses, while Caitlin was questioned. The racial undertones were impossible to ignore. As a white player in a predominantly black league, she faced unique pressures and expectations. Some embraced her as the savior of women's basketball. Others resented the attention she received, feeling that players of color have been doing incredible things for years without the same recognition. Through it all, Caitlin remained focused on what mattered most: winning games and elevating women's basketball. Her senior year, she led Iowa on an incredible NCAA tournament run that captured the imagination of the entire country. Game after game, she delivered performances that seemed almost scripted, as if written by Hollywood screenwriters. The ratings soared. The arena sold out. People who had never watched women's basketball before were suddenly hooked. In the championship game against LSU, Caitlin put on one of the most spectacular individual performances in college basketball history, scoring 41 points in a losing effort. But something happened during that game that would foreshadow the challenges to come. As the final seconds ticked away, with the outcome decided, LSU's players began celebrating prematurely. One player, in a moment captured by cameras, appeared to say something directly to Caitlin as they passed each other. The sports world debated what was said, but one thing was clear. There was tension there. Resentment. A clash of styles, personalities, and perhaps perspectives. Despite the loss, Caitlin had become a household name. She had transformed women's college basketball and brought unprecedented attention to the sport. She was the undisputed face of the next generation of players, the one who would carry the torch forward. But what no one could have predicted was how the transition to professional basketball would test her in ways college never could. The resentment that had been simmering beneath the surface would soon boil over, as established players and coaches struggled to accept this newcomer who was changing the game on her own terms. The stage was set for a collision of values, egos, and visions for what women's basketball should be. And Caitlin Clark was right in the middle of it all, armed with nothing but her talent, her determination, and her unshakable belief in herself. The tension in that gym had been building for weeks, but on this particular Tuesday afternoon, it reached a boiling point that would leave everyone watching from the sidelines absolutely speechless. Practice had been going for 90 minutes, and for the fourth time in a row, Caitlin Clark found herself standing on the perimeter while others rotated in front of her. Not rested, not strategically subbed out, but systematically ignored as if she were invisible. The coaching staff's behavior had become so consistent that fans in the bleachers started exchanging worried glances, their phones already out, recording what they were witnessing. What made this moment different was that it wasn't just about playing time anymore. It had become personal. The assistant coach, whose name we won't mention here but whose actions speak volumes, deliberately called out 3 other players for shooting drill, while Caitlin stood right there, hands on her hips, waiting for that simple acknowledgement every athlete deserves. The disrespect was so blatant that even some teammates appeared uncomfortable, their eyes darting between Caitlin and the coaching staff as if caught in some impossible loyalty test. One veteran player, who's been in the league for over a decade, actually opened her mouth to say something before thinking better of it. That's when the whispers started rippling through the small crowd of observers. "This is intentional," someone muttered. "They're trying to break her." And honestly, looking at the pattern of behavior over the past weeks, it was hard to argue otherwise. Every time Caitlin built momentum, every time she started finding her rhythm with the national team, something happened to disrupt her flow. A questionable foul call in scrimmage, a sudden rotation that somehow always left her on the bench during crucial moments. And now this, being completely overlooked during a drill she had clearly been waiting to participate in. What made it even more painful was that this wasn't just happening in some vacuum. The entire basketball world was watching. The same fans who had driven ratings up by 36% whenever she played, the same supporters who had made her jersey the bestseller in WNBA history, The same people who had helped secure those charter flights for team. They were all witnessing what looked like a systematic attempt to diminish the very player who had brought so much attention to their sport. And the most heartbreaking part? Caitlin's reaction wasn't anger or outrage. It was quiet dignity mixed with what looked like profound disappointment. She didn't argue or cause a scene. She just stood there for what felt like an eternity, processing what was happening in real time. But what happened next, what she did in the moments following this public humiliation, would shock even her harshest critics and leave the entire basketball world questioning what they had just witnessed. Because as the coaching staff continued with their drill, pretending not to notice the elephant in the room, Caitlin Clark made a decision that would change everything. The moment that would change everything began not with a bang, but with the sound of Stephen A. Smith's voice cutting through the noise like a surgical knife. On his ESPN set, surrounded by monitors and the usual sports paraphernalia, something shifted in his demeanor. The usually bombastic commentator leaned forward, his eyes narrowing with intensity that viewers had rarely seen before. "I've been in this business for decades," Smith began, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper that somehow felt louder than his usual shouts. "I've seen legends rise and fall. I've witnessed moments that define careers. But what I'm about to tell you, this isn't just about basketball anymore. This is about something much deeper." The camera zoomed in slightly, capturing the raw emotion in his eyes. Smith paused, letting the weight of his words hang in the air. Across America, viewers leaned closer to their screens. "Caitlin Clark," he continued, his voice gaining strength with each word. "Let's be crystal clear about who this young woman is. She's not just a rookie. She's not just a talented player. She is a phenomenon. She is the cash cow that this league has been praying for since its inception." Smith's hand slammed down on the desk, but not in anger, in emphasis. 36%. That's how much ratings dropped when she wasn't playing in the All-Star weekend. 36%. Do you understand what that means in business terms? In sports terms? In cultural terms? He leaned back, shaking his head in disbelief. Charter jets. Do you know when they got those? 2 weeks after Caitlin Clark arrived. Coincidence? I don't believe in coincidences this big. The tension in the studio was palpable. Smith's co-host shifted uncomfortably, sensing where this was going. "And now," Smith said, his voice dropping again to that intense, near whisper, "we're hearing reports that she's walked away, that she's finally had enough of the disrespect. And I'm here to tell you something that might shock some of you." He leaned forward again, his eyes locked on the camera. "If she did walk away, if she finally said enough is enough, I wouldn't blame her, not for 1 second." The statement hung in the air like a challenge. Smith's co-host exchanged glances, but he wasn't finished. "Let's be honest about what's really happening here," he continued, his voice rising with passion. "We've seen it time and time again. The hard fouls that go uncalled. The physical plays that cross the line. The benching when she's clearly the best player on the floor. This isn't about basketball strategy. This is something else entirely." Smith's voice cracked with emotion. This young woman has done everything right. She's brought millions of new eyes to women's basketball. She's changed ticket sales, changed TV ratings, changed the entire energy of the sport. And what has she received in return? Targeted, overshadowed, dragged down. He stood up now, pacing behind the desk like a caged animal. "I've seen the footage. I've talked to people who were there. The way she was ignored during that drill. It wasn't just a coaching decision. It was a message. And apparently, Caitlin Clark received that message loud and clear." Smith stopped pacing and faced the camera directly. "You know what breaks my heart? Not that she might have walked away. What breaks my heart is that she was put in a position where walking away felt like her only option." The camera cut to a close-up of Smith's face, tears welling in his eyes. "This isn't just about Caitlin Clark anymore. This is about every young athlete who's ever been told they don't belong. Every person who's ever been overlooked because of who they are. Every individual who's had to work twice as hard to get half the recognition." His voice broke. "And if Caitlin Clark's departure is what it takes to shine a light on this injustice, then maybe, just maybe, her sacrifice will mean something. Maybe it will force us to have a conversation we should have had a long time ago." Smith took a deep breath, composing himself. The WNBA needs Caitlin Clark. But more importantly, Caitlin Clark needs to be in an environment where she's respected, where her contributions are valued, where she's allowed to be the phenomenal athlete she was born to be. He sat back down, his energy spent, but his message delivered. So to answer the question everyone's asking, would I blame her for walking away? Absolutely not. In fact, I might just commend her for having the courage to say enough. The segment ended with Smith staring directly into the camera, his expression a mixture of anger, sadness, and hope. Within minutes, clips of his impassioned defense of Clark were circulating across social media, each one racking up millions of views. But what happened next would shock even the most cynical observers. The moment Caitlin Clark walked off that practice court, the internet didn't just react, it exploded. Within minutes, hashtag Justice for Caitlin was trending nationwide, with millions of fans flooding social media with outrage, support, and disbelief. Memes comparing her treatment to historical injustices went viral. Side-by-side clips showing other players receiving opportunities Clark was denied circulated like wildfire, each one adding fuel to the growing inferno of public anger. Former WNBA legends took to Twitter, some defending the coaching staff, but most, shockingly, aligning with Clark, with one iconic tweet reading simply, "We built this league so no player would ever have to endure this." Yet here we are. Celebrity voices joined the chorus, with Hollywood stars, musicians, and even political figures weighing in on what they called a shameful moment in sports history. Sports journalists who had previously remained silent suddenly found their voices, publishing scathing op-eds about the systemic issues in women's basketball that had led to this moment. The most powerful development came when sponsors began quietly making calls, with one major athletic brand allegedly threatening to pull their entire WNBA sponsorship package unless this situation is rectified immediately. The ripple effect extended beyond sports, becoming a cultural touchstone about respect, recognition, and the treatment of trailblazers who disrupt established systems. Morning shows led with the story. Evening news segments devoted entire segments to it. And somewhere in the middle of this media frenzy, a new hashtag emerged. Hashtag the Clark Effect, representing not just one player's journey, but movement demanding change in how we treat those who elevate entire industries. The question on everyone's mind wasn't just whether Caitlin would return to Team USA. It was whether women's basketball would ever be the same again. In the aftermath of what witnesses are calling the most heartbreaking moment in women's basketball this year, Caitlin Clark did something nobody expected. She didn't rage. She didn't retaliate. She didn't even issue a statement through her agent. Instead, according to those who claimed to have seen her in the hallway outside the practice facility, she sat alone on a bench, head bowed, water bottle untouched beside her. For 5 full minutes, she just sat there, processing what had just happened. This wasn't the reaction of someone angry. It was a quiet dignity of someone deeply hurt. Someone who had given everything to a sport that seemed determined to push her away. But here's what they don't understand about Caitlin Clark. Every time they've tried to diminish her, she's only grown stronger. Every time they've attempted to sideline her, she's only become more central to the game. And this moment, this alleged breaking point, might just be her most powerful statement yet. Because what if walking away wasn't giving up? What if it was taking control? What if choosing herself over a system that refused to value her wasn't weakness, but the ultimate act of strength? The irony is breathtaking. They try to make her small, to remind her of her place, to show her that despite her record-breaking season, despite the millions she brought to the league, despite the way she transformed women's basketball overnight, she was still somehow less than. But in their attempt to humble her, they may have inadvertently elevated her to something even greater than a basketball player. They may have made her a symbol of every young athlete who's ever been told they don't belong, every woman who's ever been passed over for less qualified men, every person of color who's had to work twice as hard for half the recognition, every immigrant who's been made to feel like an outsider despite contributing more than anyone else. In walking away, Caitlin Clark wasn't just rejecting a coach's decision. She was rejecting a system that values loyalty over merit, that protects the established order over embracing excellence, that would rather maintain the comfort of the few than recognize the talent of the many. And Stephen A. Smith saw it immediately in his now viral segment, leaning into the camera with that familiar intensity that has made him one of America's most trusted sports voices. He said something that will echo through arenas for years to come. My point is, grow up. Who cares? If you're Magic and Bird, that didn't stop Jordan from coming along and doing what he did. Legends aren't threatened by greatness. They're inspired by it. The message was clear. This wasn't just about Caitlin Clark anymore. This was about the soul of women's basketball. About whether the sport would embrace the very thing that could take it to unprecedented heights, or whether it would cling to outdated hierarchies and resentments that keep it small. And somewhere in that hallway, as Caitlin Clark allegedly sat alone, processing what just happened, she must have realized something profound. That her value wasn't determined by how many minutes she played, or whether she made the Olympic team. Her value was in the millions of young girls who now believed they could change the game, in the parents who were suddenly buying tickets to WNBA games for the first time, in the sponsors who were finally investing in women's sports with the same passion they'd always reserved for men. That night, as rumors of her departure spread like wildfire across social media, something remarkable happened. Hashtag supporting Clark began trending worldwide. Former players came forward with stories of their own experiences with marginalization. Fans started organizing grassroots movements to demand better treatment of athletes regardless of their status or background. What started as one player's alleged humiliation was transforming into a movement for change. And isn't that the most American story of all? That from moments of injustice, from the ashes of disrespect, new possibilities emerge. That when one person stands up, whether by speaking out or by walking away, they create space for others to stand too. The beauty of what Caitlin Clark represents isn't just in her three-pointers or record-breaking assists. It's in her unshakable belief that the game is bigger than any one player, bigger than any coach, bigger than any single organization. It's in her understanding that true greatness isn't measured in points or titles, but in impact, in the doors you open for others who will come after you. Whether she returns to Team USA or not, whether the story ends with triumphant comeback or quiet transition to new challenges, one thing is certain. Caitlin Clark has already won because she's forced a conversation that needed to happen. She's challenged a system that needed challenging. And she's reminded us all that dignity isn't given, it's claimed. As the sun set on that day of alleged controversy, with no official statement from Clark or Team USA, with fans divided and commentators speculating, one truth emerged crystal clear. Sometimes the most powerful statement isn't made with words or actions, but with a quiet resolve to choose yourself when others won't. And in doing so, Caitlin Clark may have just hit the most important shot of her career. Not on a basketball court, but in the hearts of millions who now see themselves in her story. As the dust settles on this explosive controversy, one question hangs in the air like a storm cloud. What happens next? Caitlin Clark hasn't issued an official statement. Team USA remains conspicuously silent. The basketball world holds its breath, waiting for the other shoe to drop. Will she return? Will this be the moment that forces the WNBA to confront its own demons? Or will we witness the birth of a new chapter in women's basketball? One defined not by the old guard's resistance to change, but by the power of a single athlete to transform an entire sport? The truth is, whatever happens next, Caitlin Clark has already changed the game. She's shown millions of young athletes that talent deserves recognition, that excellence demands respect, and that sometimes walking away is the strongest statement you can make. This isn't just about one player or one team anymore. It's about the future of women's sports, about who gets to tell the story, about whose voices matter. And as we watch this story unfold in real time, we're not just spectators. We're participants in a movement that's reshaping athletics' identity and what it means to stand up for yourself in a world that wasn't built for you. If you believe in dignity over disrespect, in talent over tradition, in the power of one person to change everything, then hit that subscribe button, because the story isn't over, not even close. And together, we'll be here to witness every twist, every revelation, every moment that history has made. Stay tuned. The truth is just starting to break.